I found out about my own daughter's wedding from a neighbor, not from a call, not from an invitation, just a casual, "Oh, I can't wait for Angela's big day next week," like it was something I was already part of. But I wasn't. Because there was no envelope in my mailbox, no message on my phone, nothing. That night, my grandson Ethan sat beside me quiet for a long time, then leaned in and whispered, "I saw where Mom hid your invitation." Grandma. And in that moment, something inside me broke, and something else woke up. If you've ever felt pushed out by the people you love the most, maybe this story will stay with you. Like, subscribe and tell me, what would you do if your own child tried to erase you from their life? I didn't sleep that night. Ethan's words kept echoing in my head like a clock that refused to stop ticking. I saw where Mom hid your invitation. Not misplaced, not lost, not forgotten. Hidden. I sat in my living room long after midnight, the soft glow of the lamp casting shadows across walls that had witnessed every chapter of my life, every sacrifice, every quiet victory no one else ever saw. Angela used to sit right there on that same couch, her legs tucked under her, braiding her hair while telling me about her day at school. Back then, she told me everything. Back then, I was her whole world. I raised Angela alone after her father died. She was only 6 when the doctors told us there was nothing more they could do. I still remember the way her small hand clung to mine at the hospital, how she kept asking Daddy's coming home right. And I had to lie. Because sometimes love sounds like the truth, but feels like a lie. After he passed, everything changed overnight. Bills piled up, silence filled the house in ways I didn't know how to fight. I didn't have the luxury of breaking down, not for long anyway. There was a little girl watching me learning how to survive by the way I stood back up. So I worked. I worked mornings at a diner off Route 9, pouring coffee and pretending I wasn't exhausted. Afternoons, I cleaned offices downtown, quiet buildings that smelled like polished floors, an ambition that didn't belong to me. At night, I folded laundry at a motel just outside Savannah, listening to machines hum while my body begged for rest. 3 jobs, sometimes 4 when things got tight, and they always got tight. But I never let Angela feel it. Her shoes were always new when school started. Her lunchbox was always full. Her birthdays, no matter how small, always had a cake, even if I had to bake it myself after a double shift. I made sure she never saw what it cost me, because that's what mothers do. They hide the cracks so their children can grow on steady ground. Angela used to call me her hero. I remember one night she couldn't have been more than 10. She crawled into my bed during a thunderstorm. Her hair smelled like coconut shampoo, and she whispered, "Mom, when I grow up, I'm going to take care of you the way you take care of me." I smiled in the dark, kissed her forehead, and told her she didn't have to. But a part of me held on to those words anyway. Not because I expected anything in return, but because it meant she saw me, really saw me. Years passed and life softened in small ways. I managed to move us into a better neighborhood, not fancy but safe, quiet, the kind of place where neighbors waved and kids rode their bikes until sunset. Angela grew into a beautiful, strong woman, smart, determined, kind. She got into college on a partial scholarship, and I still remember crying in the parking lot after dropping her off. I wasn't crying because she was leaving. I was crying because she made it, because everything we went through it meant something. And for a while, nothing really changed between us. She still called me every Sunday, sometimes twice a week. We'd talk about everything: her classes, her friends, her dreams. She'd laugh the same way she did when she was little, full and unguarded. Even after she graduated and started working at a marketing firm in Atlanta, she kept that routine. Sunday calls, she used to say, non-negotiable. And I believed her. I believed that no matter how far life took her, there was something between us that couldn't be broken, something permanent, something real. But looking back now, I think that's where I was wrong. Because things didn't change all at once. They shifted, slowly, quietly. The way a house settles before the cracks begin to show. It started with missed calls. "Sorry, Mom, I've been busy." then shorter conversations. I'll call you back later. Later turned into days. Days turned into silence. At first I told myself it was normal. She had a career now, a life, responsibilities. Children grow up. They move forward. That's what you raise them to do. But there was something different about the distance. It wasn't just space. It felt deliberate. Like doors were being closed one by one, and I wasn't even in the room to hear them shut. Then came Marcus. The first time Angela mentioned him, her voice had that spark I hadn't heard in a long time. "Mom, I met someone." I remember smiling, leaning back in my chair, already picturing wedding bells and grandchildren running through my yard. "What's he like?" I asked. She hesitated just for a second. "He's different. I didn't think much of it at the time. People always say that when they're in love. But the first time I met Marcus Brooks, I understood exactly what she meant. He was tall, well-dressed, the kind of man who looked like he belonged on the cover of a magazine. Everything about him was polished, his suit, his smile, even the way he shook my hand. But there was something else, something cold. He looked at me the way people look at something they don't quite understand and don't care to. Polite, but distant, like I was an obligation, not family. That night, during dinner, he spoke about his business, his investments, his plans, big things, expensive things, a world that felt far removed from the one I had built my life in. I listened, I smiled, I tried, because that's what you do when your child loves someone. You make space, even if you don't quite fit. At one point, I excused myself to the kitchen. I stood there longer than I needed to, staring at the sink, steadying myself. Angela followed me a few minutes later. So she asked, leaning against the counter, "What do you think?" I turned to her, forcing a smile. "He seems accomplished." She laughed, but it didn't reach her eyes. That's one way to put it. I wanted to say more. I wanted to tell her that something felt off, that the way he looked at her, at us, didn't sit right in my chest, but I didn't, because I saw how happy she wanted to be. And sometimes, love means holding your tongue, even when your heart is trying to warn you. From that moment on, things changed faster. Angela became harder to reach. Plans were made without me. Decisions were announced, not discussed, and every time I tried to step closer, it felt like someone was quietly pushing me back. I didn't know it then, but I was already being moved out of her life, piece by piece, until one day, there would be nothing left to hold on to. The second time I met Marcus Brooks, I paid closer attention. The first time I told myself I was just being protective, that maybe I was reading too much into a man my daughter clearly cared about. But something in me, something quiet but persistent, refused to settle. So when Angela invited me to dinner again a few weeks later, I said yes. Not just as her mother, but as someone trying to understand the man who was slowly becoming the center of her world. They had chosen a restaurant in Buckhead, the kind of place where the lighting is soft, the plates are art, and the prices make you glance twice before pretending you didn't see them. I arrived early. Old habits. I've always believed that being early is a sign of respect, but sitting there alone surrounded by polished wood and low conversations, I felt out of place. Like I had stepped into a life that wasn't built for someone like me. When Angela and Marcus walked in, heads turned. They looked perfect together. Angela wore a fitted navy dress, her hair styled in soft waves, confidence radiating from her like something she had recently learned to wear. Marcus stood beside her in a tailored suit, his posture straight, his expression calm and controlled. They looked like they belonged, and for a moment I wondered if I was the only thing that didn't. Mom Angela smiled, leaning down to hug me, but it was quick, careful, like she didn't want to wrinkle her dress. Marcus extended his hand. "Mrs. Washington," he said, his voice smooth. "Good to see you again." I shook his hand, noticing how firm his grip was, measured, almost calculated. "Please call me Diana," I replied. He gave a small smile. Of course, Diana. But he didn't say it like someone who meant it. We sat down, and almost immediately the conversation shifted into a rhythm that felt rehearsed. Marcus talked. about his company, about expansion, about investments in real estate across 3 states. Numbers flew across the table like they were part of a language I wasn't meant to understand. Angela listened, nodding, smiling occasionally, adding something small like she was trying to match his pace, his world. I sat there quietly folding my napkin in my lap, searching for a place to fit into the conversation. At one point, Angela turned to me. "Mom, Marcus is thinking about buying a property in Charleston. It's incredible, you'd love it." "Oh," I said, smiling, "that sounds beautiful." Marcus glanced at me just for a second. Then he said, "It's more of an investment than anything else." Something about the way he said it made me pause. Not rude, not directly, but dismissive. Like beauty wasn't the point. Like feelings weren't the point. Everything with him seemed to come down to value. Profit, image. Later, when the waiter came to take our order, I noticed something else. Marcus didn't ask Angela what she wanted. He ordered for both of them. "She'll have the salmon," he said, smoothly. "No butter." Angela didn't correct him. She just nodded. That stayed with me. Not because it was loud, but because it wasn't. Because she let it happen. The rest of the evening followed the same pattern. Marcus leading, Angela adjusting, me observing, and the more I watched, the clearer it became. This wasn't just a relationship, it was a structure, and Marcus was at the top of it. At one point, he turned the conversation toward me. "So, Diana," he said, leaning back slightly, "Angela tells me you worked multiple jobs when she was growing up." "I did," I replied simply. "That must have been difficult." There was a pause. Not a sympathetic one, a measured one. I nodded. It was what I had to do. He studied me for a moment, then gave a small, polite smile. "I suppose not everyone has the same opportunities." The words landed softly, but they carried weight. I felt it immediately, a quiet judgment wrapped in courtesy. I opened my mouth to respond, but Angela jumped in quickly. "Marcus just means you're strong, Mom." I looked at her. She smiled, but there was something behind it. Something tight. Something careful. I nodded slowly. "I know what he means." And I did. More than she realized. Dinner ended with polite conversation and a check Marcus didn't even glance at before handing over his card. Outside, the night air felt different. Cooler. Real. Angela hugged me again a little tighter this time. "I'll call you Sunday," she said. "Of course you will," I replied gently. Marcus stood beside her, hands in his coat pockets. Then, as Angela stepped away to take a phone call, he turned to me. Just the two of us. The streetlight above us cast a soft glow, but his expression remained unreadable. "I hope you enjoyed the evening," he said. "I did," I answered. He nodded once. Then, after a brief pause, he added, "You've done well raising Angela." There it was again, that tone, that subtle distance. "Thank you," I said carefully. He looked past me for a second, then back again. "Angela has a lot of potential. She's stepping into a different kind of life now." I felt my chest tighten slightly. "I believe she is," I said. He nodded. "And with that comes certain expectations." Silence stretched between us, not uncomfortable, but heavy, deliberate. Then he said it, calmly, clearly. "Not everyone fits into every environment, Diana." I didn't respond right away, because I understood exactly what he was saying and exactly who he was talking about. Instead, I met his gaze, held it, and said quietly, "Family isn't an environment you earn your place in." For a moment, just a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Then it was gone. Angela returned, smiling again, unaware of what had just passed between us. We said our goodbyes. They drove off together, and I stood there alone on the sidewalk, watching the taillights disappear into the distance. That was the moment I should have trusted my instincts, the moment I should have spoken up, the moment I should have realized that this wasn't just about a man I didn't like. This was about a man who saw me as something that didn't belong, and worse, a daughter who was slowly starting to believe him. I went home that night with a feeling I couldn't shake. Not fear, not exactly. Something deeper, like a door had quietly closed somewhere behind me, and I hadn't even heard it latch. After that dinner, things didn't fall apart all at once. They faded, quietly, gradually, like a photograph left too long in the sun. At first, I tried to hold on to what we had. I still called Angela every Sunday. The first time she didn't answer, I told myself she was busy. The second time, I left a voicemail. "Hey baby, just checking in. Call me when you get a minute," she texted back 3 hours later. "Sorry, Mom, long day. I'll call you tomorrow." Tomorrow came and went. So did the next. By the third missed call, something inside me started to shift, not into anger, but into awareness. This wasn't just life getting in the way. This was distance being created, one piece at a time. I noticed it in the small things first, the way her voice changed when we did speak shorter, more careful, like she was choosing her words instead of letting them flow. The way she stopped asking about me. Our conversations became updates instead of conversations. "I'm busy. Work's been crazy. Marcus and I are planning a lot right now. Always Marcus. Always them, never us." Then came the wedding preparations, or at least what I knew of them, because I wasn't invited into that world either. I found out Angela had chosen a venue from a distant cousin who posted pictures online. A beautiful hotel ballroom in downtown Atlanta. Crystal chandeliers, white roses, polished floors that reflected everything like glass. I stared at those photos longer than I should have, not because of the place, but because of what I wasn't in. No phone call, no mom. What do you think? Just silence. A few days later, I gathered the courage to bring it up. "Angela." I said gently over the phone, "I saw the venue. It's beautiful." There was a pause on the other end. "Oh." "Yeah," she replied. "We just finalized it. I asked softly. Marcus and I." Of course. I swallowed the ache in my throat. "I would have loved to see it with you." Another pause. Longer this time. Then she said, "It's just been really hectic, Mom." Hectic, that word again. The polite shield people use when they don't want to say the truth. "I understand," I said. And I did, more than she knew, because I wasn't just hearing what she said. I was hearing what she didn't. Weeks passed and the pattern repeated itself. Dress fittings I wasn't invited to, catering decisions I only heard about afterward, guest lists I never saw. Every time I reached out, there was a reason. Every time I offered help, there was a deflection. "You don't have to worry about it. We've got it handled. It's easier this way. Easier." That word started to feel like a wall, not just between me and the wedding, but between me and my daughter. One afternoon, I stopped by her house with a small box of cookies I had baked her favorite, the same recipe I'd been making since she was a child. She opened the door, surprised. "Mom, you didn't call." I smiled, holding up the box. I was in the neighborhood. That wasn't entirely true, but I needed to see her. Needed to remind myself that we were still something. She hesitated for just a second before stepping aside. "Come in." The house was beautiful. Too beautiful. Everything looked like it belonged in a catalog, perfectly arranged, untouched, almost staged. I placed the cookies on the kitchen counter. "I made these for you." She glanced at them, then smiled politely. "Thanks, Mom." Polite. That word didn't belong between us. We stood there for a moment, both searching for something to say. Finally, I asked, "How's everything going with the wedding?" Her shoulders stiffened slightly. "It's good. We're almost done with the big stuff." "I'd still love to help," I said gently. "Even with something small." She shook her head quickly. "No, it's okay. Marcus has a planner handling everything." "Of course he did. Angela." I said, my voice soft but steady. "I'm your mother. I want to be part of this." She looked at me then, really looked, and for a brief second I saw something in her eyes. Not anger, not even annoyance. Something closer to conflict. Then it disappeared. "It's just easier this way," she repeated. There it was again. That word. That wall. I felt something inside me crack, not loudly, not dramatically, but enough for me to notice. Easier for who I asked quietly. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked past me toward the living room as if the answer was somewhere else. Finally, she said, "Mom, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. Harder." I nodded slowly. "I'm not trying to make anything harder," I said. "I just don't understand why I'm being left out." Her expression tightened. "You're not being left out," she said quickly. "Then why does it feel like I am silence? Thick. Uncomfortable." Then she sighed, running a hand through her hair. "It's just different now," she said. "Things are bigger. There are expectations." There it was again, that word, expectations. Marcus's voice echoed in my mind. With that comes certain expectations. I took a breath, steadying myself. "I've always supported you, Angela," I said, "no matter what." I know she replied, but she didn't sound convinced. Or maybe she didn't want to be. I picked up my purse, slowly realizing I had overstayed a moment that was never meant to be extended. "I should go," I said. She didn't stop me, didn't walk me to the door the way she used to, just stood there, arms crossed, lightly watching. As I reached the door, I turned back one last time. "Angela," I said softly, "whatever this is, it doesn't have to be this way." She looked at me, her expression unreadable. "It's just easier," she said again. And that was the moment I understood something I had been trying not to see. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't stress. This was a choice. A quiet, steady choice to place distance between us. I stepped outside, the afternoon sun warm against my skin, but it didn't reach the place inside me that had just gone cold. As I walked to my car, I realized something else. I hadn't seen a single wedding invitation anywhere in that house. Not on the counter, not on the table, not even tucked into a stack of mail. Nothing. And for the first time, I started to wonder if Ethan's words weren't just a child's imagination, but the beginning of a truth I wasn't ready to face. A few days after that visit, I stopped trying to call Angela first. Not because I didn't want to hear her voice, but because I needed to see if she would reach for mine. Days passed, then a week. Nothing, no calls, no texts, no "hey mom," just checking in. The silence settled into my house like an uninvited guest, one that made everything feel heavier than it should. That's when Ethan started coming by more often. At first it was small things, his dad dropping him off for an hour or two, saying Angela was busy with wedding stuff. Then it became longer visits. Afternoons turned into evenings, and sometimes he'd fall asleep on my couch, with the TV still playing softly in the background. I didn't ask too many questions. Children have a way of speaking when they feel safe, and Ethan felt safe with me. One Saturday afternoon, we sat at the kitchen table working on a puzzle he had brought with him. It was 1,000 pieces, tiny fragments of a beach sunset, all blues and golds blending together. Ethan was quiet more than usual, not the comfortable quiet I was used to, a thinking kind of quiet. "You okay, baby?" I asked, gently placing another piece into the puzzle. He shrugged without looking up. "Yeah." I watched him for a moment. "School good, yeah. Friends, yeah." Short answers, closed doors. I recognized it. I had seen it before, in his mother. I set my piece down and leaned back slightly. "You know, I said softly when people start saying, 'yeah' a lot, it usually means something's on their mind." He didn't respond right away, just kept turning a puzzle piece in his fingers over and over. Then after a long pause, he said, "Grandma?" "Yes, baby." He finally looked up at me. "Are you going to Mom's wedding?" The question hit me harder than I expected. I forced a small smile. "I haven't gotten an invitation yet." He frowned. "That's weird." I let out a quiet breath. "Yeah, it is." He went back to the puzzle, but his movements became slower, more deliberate, like he was building up to something. A few minutes passed in silence before he spoke again. I saw it. My heart skipped, saw what I asked, keeping my voice calm. He hesitated, then leaned in closer, lowering his voice like he was sharing a secret. "Your invitation." The room suddenly felt smaller. "Where?" I asked gently. Ethan glanced toward the living room even though no one else was there. "In Mom's bedroom," he whispered. "In her dresser." I felt a chill run through me. "Are you sure it was mine?" He nodded quickly. "Yeah, it had your name on it. Diana Washington." Hearing my name out loud like that on something I had never seen made everything feel real in a way it hadn't before. Did you open it? I asked. He shook his head. No. Mom got mad when she saw me near her dresser. What did she say? Ethan's expression shifted slightly, like he was replaying the moment in his head. She said I wasn't supposed to touch anything in there, and then she took the envelope and put it in the bottom drawer. The bottom drawer, I repeated. He nodded. The one she keeps locked. Locked. The word echoed in my mind. Did she say anything else? I asked. Ethan hesitated again. Then quietly, he said, she told Marcus it was handled. My chest tightened. Handled, I repeated. He nodded. I heard them talking after. Marcus said something about not making things complicated. There it was again. Complicated, easier, handled, different words, same meaning. I looked at Ethan, really looked at him, and suddenly I wasn't just seeing my grandson. I was seeing a child caught in the middle of something he didn't fully understand. Something he shouldn't have had to witness. Why are you telling me this, baby? I asked softly. He shrugged, but his eyes didn't leave mine. Because it's not fair. The simplicity of that answer broke something in me. Not loudly, not violently, just enough to make it impossible to ignore anymore. I reached across the table and took his small hand in mine. You're right, I said gently. It's not. He squeezed my hand back. Are you mad at Mom? He asked. I paused. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because I had too many. I'm hurt, I said finally. He nodded like he understood more than a 10-year-old should. I think Mom is scared, he said. That caught me off guard. Scared of what? He shrugged again, but this time it was slower, of messing things up. I leaned back slightly, letting his words settle. Scared. Not just controlled, not just influenced, but scared. That changed something. Not everything, but enough to make me look at the situation from a different angle. Still, fear didn't excuse betrayal. It didn't justify hiding something as simple and as meaningful as a wedding invitation from your own mother. I stood up slowly, walking over to the sink just to give myself a moment to breathe. The afternoon light streamed through the window, casting soft patterns across the counter. Everything looked normal, peaceful, but nothing felt that way anymore. Behind me, I heard Ethan's voice. Grandma. I turned. Yeah, are you going to go get it? The question hung in the air between us, simple, direct, and impossible to ignore. I looked at him, this little boy who had just handed me a truth I hadn't asked for but desperately needed. I don't know, I said honestly. He tilted his head slightly. Why not? I smiled faintly, because sometimes finding the truth means facing things you're not ready for. He thought about that for a moment, then said, but what if you already know it? I froze, because he was right. Deep down, I already did. I just hadn't wanted to say it out loud, hadn't wanted to accept that my own daughter had made a decision to hide me from one of the most important days of her life. I walked back to the table and sat down across from him. Ethan, I said softly, if I go looking for that invitation, things might change. He looked at me seriously. They're already changing. Another truth. From a child who wasn't supposed to understand so much. I let out a slow breath, then nodded. Maybe you're right. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. Not into anger, not yet, but into clarity. Because for the first time, I wasn't just wondering anymore. I had direction, a place, a drawer, a locked one, and a truth waiting inside it. I just had to decide if I was ready to open it. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table long after Ethan had gone home. The house felt different. Not empty. I had known emptiness before, the kind that settles in after loss and lingers like a shadow. But this was something else. This was tension, the kind that waits, the kind that demands a decision. In front of me sat a cup of tea that had long gone cold. I hadn't touched it in over an hour. My hands rested on the table, fingers slightly curled like they were holding onto something invisible. Ethan's words kept circling in my mind. The bottom drawer, locked, handled. Each one felt like a piece of a puzzle I had been avoiding when I could no longer pretend wasn't there. I had spent years teaching myself how to endure, how to let things go, how to choose peace over confrontation. But this wasn't something I could ignore, because it wasn't just about a wedding invitation. It was about what that invitation represented. A place, a role, a connection, and the quiet, deliberate act of removing me from it. I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes for a moment. What would I even say if I found it? What explanation could possibly make sense of this? I had asked Angela before, gently, carefully, and all I got was, "It's easier this way." Easier. That word again. I opened my eyes and stared at the wall in front of me, my thoughts drifting back through the years. Angela had never been afraid to speak her mind. Even as a child, she had a fire in her. I remember when she was 13 standing up to a teacher who accused her of something she didn't do. She didn't cry. She didn't back down. She looked that woman in the eye and said, "You don't get to decide who I am." That was my daughter, strong, unapologetic. So where did that girl go? Or worse, who convinced her she needed to be someone else? Marcus's voice echoed in my memory. Not everyone fits into every environment. I clenched my jaw slightly. This wasn't just about him. It couldn't be, because Angela wasn't a child anymore. She was making choices, and one of those choices was to leave me out. I stood up slowly, walking to the window. Outside, the streetlights cast a soft glow over the quiet neighborhood. Everything looked calm, but inside me, something was building. Not anger, not yet, resolve. Because there comes a point when silence stops being strength and starts becoming surrender. And I had not come this far in life to surrender my place in my own daughter's story. Still, fear lingered, not fear of confrontation, but fear of confirmation. Because once I saw that envelope with my own eyes, there would be no more doubt. No more, maybe. Just truth. And truth doesn't always heal. Sometimes it breaks what's left. I turned away from the window and walked back to the table, sitting down again. What if I'm wrong? I whispered to the empty room. What if Ethan misunderstood? What if it wasn't what it looked like? What if there was some explanation I hadn't considered? I wanted to believe that. I needed to, because the alternative meant my daughter had made a conscious decision to erase me from one of the most important days of her life. And that kind of pain doesn't just pass. It settles. Deep. Permanent. I rubbed my hands together slowly, trying to warm them, even though the room wasn't cold. I could just ask her again, I said quietly. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew they weren't enough. I had asked, and she had answered, just not with the truth. I stood up again, this time more firmly, walked to the sink, turned on the water, watched it run for a moment, clear and steady. Sometimes the simplest things remind you that life keeps moving whether you're ready or not. I turned it off, dried my hands, and made a decision. Not a loud one, not dramatic, but final. I was going to find out the truth, not through questions, not through assumptions, but with my own eyes. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, and the sky held that quiet gray blue that only exists for a short moment before day begins. I got dressed slowly, choosing something simple, a beige cardigan, dark slacks, comfortable shoes, nothing that looked like I was preparing for a confrontation, because I wasn't. At least that's what I told myself. I grabbed my purse, my keys, and paused at the door. For just a second, because once I stepped outside, there would be no turning back. I opened the door anyway. The drive to Angela's house felt longer than usual, even though I had taken that route countless times before. Every street, every turn, every familiar landmark seemed to carry a weight it hadn't before. I kept my hands steady on the wheel, my eyes focused ahead. No music, no distractions. Just the quiet hum of the engine and the sound of my own thoughts. When I finally pulled into her driveway, I sat there for a moment. The house looked the same. Perfect. Untouched. Like nothing inside it could possibly be wrong. I turned off the engine, took a breath, then another. "You can do this," I said softly to myself. Not as encouragement, but as truth. Because I had already come too far to stop now. I stepped out of the car and walked up to the front door. Each step felt heavier than the last, not because I didn't want to be there, but because I knew something was waiting for me on the other side. I knocked. Once, twice. A few seconds passed before the door opened. Angela stood there, her expression shifting from surprise to something else I couldn't quite name. "Mom," she said, "what are you doing here?" I met her eyes, held them, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't soften my voice. "I need to talk to you," I said. Behind her, I could see the hallway, the living room, the same space I had stood in just days ago, but this time I wasn't here to visit. I wasn't here to pretend everything was fine. I was here for something specific, something real, and whether she knew it or not, everything was about to change. Angela didn't move right away. She stood in the doorway, one hand still gripping the edge of it, her body angled just enough to block my view inside. That alone told me more than any words could. Now she asked, her voice careful. "I'm actually in the middle of—" "Yes," I said quietly but firmly. "Now." Something in my tone must have reached her, because for a brief moment the polished calm she had been wearing cracked just enough for me to see the hesitation underneath. Then she stepped aside. "Okay, come in." I walked past her slowly, my senses sharper than they had been in years. Every detail felt louder, the faint scent of expensive candles, the soft hum of the air conditioning, the distant echo of footsteps upstairs, Marcus most likely. Angela closed the door behind me, and I turned to face her. She crossed her arms, a defensive gesture she probably didn't even realize she was making. "What's going on?" she asked. I studied her face. This was my daughter, the little girl who used to run to me with scraped knees and open arms, the young woman who once promised she'd always put me first. And now, she looked like someone I had to fight just to be heard. "I want to ask you something," I said. She nodded, but her eyes flickered toward the staircase for just a second, a quick glance. But I saw it. "I haven't received a wedding invitation," I continued. Her lips pressed together slightly. "I told you, Mom, things have just been busy," I finished for her. "Hectic. Easier this way." She blinked. "Yeah," she said slowly, "exactly." I took a step closer, then explained something to me. Her shoulders stiffened. "What?" "Why did Ethan tell me he saw my invitation in your dresser's silence? Not the kind that comes from confusion, the kind that comes from being caught." Angela's face didn't change dramatically. There was no gasp, no sudden outburst, just a subtle shift, a tightening around her eyes, a pause that lasted a second too long. "That's not—" She started, then stopped. I waited. I had learned over the years that silence can be more powerful than any argument, and right now, silence was pressing in on her. "Ethan shouldn't be going through my things," she said finally. Deflection, not denial. I felt my chest tighten. "Angela," I said softly, "is there an invitation with my name on it in your dresser?" She looked away, toward the living room, toward anything that wasn't me. "Mom, this isn't yes or no." The words came out steadier than I felt. She swallowed, then almost reluctantly, "Yes." There it was. Simple, clear, final. The truth I had been avoiding, now standing right in front of me. I nodded slowly, absorbing it. Why, I asked. That single word carried everything I hadn't said, everything I couldn't understand. Angela exhaled sharply, running a hand through her hair. "It's complicated." I let out a quiet breath. "No," I said. "It's not." She looked at me, her eyes flashing slightly. "You don't understand." "Then help me understand," I interrupted gently but firmly, because from where I'm standing, it looks like my own daughter invited me to her wedding, and then decided I shouldn't come. Her jaw tightened. "That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" Another pause, longer this time, and just as she opened her mouth to respond, a voice came from behind us. "Is everything all right, Marcus?" I turned slowly. He stood at the bottom of the staircase, one hand resting casually on the railing, his expression calm, but watchful, like he had been listening longer than he let on. Angela straightened slightly. "It's fine," she said quickly. Marcus's eyes shifted to me, then back to her. "I heard raised voices," he said. "They're not raised," I replied calmly. He stepped forward, closing the distance between us with an ease that felt almost deliberate. "Well," he said smoothly, "it sounds like a conversation that might need clarity." I studied him, the man who had quietly inserted himself into my daughter's life, the man whose words had begun to echo in her decisions. "Then maybe you can help with that," I said. Angela's eyes widened slightly. "Mom, no," I said softly. "I think it's time we all stop pretending." Marcus tilted his head just slightly. Pretending about what? I held his gaze. About the fact that my invitation was written and then hidden. There was a brief flicker in his expression. Not surprise. Recognition. Like this was a conversation he had already prepared for. He glanced at Angela. She looked down. That was all I needed to see. Marcus let out a small breath, then looked back at me. "Diana," he said, his tone measured, "this isn't about you personally. I felt something inside me go still. Then explain it in a way that doesn't sound personal." He clasped his hands together lightly. "This wedding is a very specific kind of event," he began. "There are expectations, optics, people who what?" I asked. He paused, choosing his words carefully. "People who operate in certain circles." There it was again. Circles, environments, expectations, different words, same meaning. "And I don't fit into those circles," I said quietly. He didn't answer, which in itself was an answer. I turned to Angela. "And you agree with that?" She hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. "Mom, it's not like that." "Then what is it like?" I asked, my voice softer now but heavier. She looked at me, and for a moment I saw something break through. Not defiance, not anger, something closer to fear. "I just didn't want things to be complicated," she said. The same word. Again. I nodded slowly. So hiding me was easier. Tears flickered in her eyes, but she blinked them back quickly. "You're twisting it, no," I said gently. "I'm finally seeing it." The room fell quiet. Even Marcus didn't speak, because there was nothing left to dress up, nothing left to soften, just the truth, standing between us. I took a breath, steadying myself. "Where is it?" I asked. Angela froze. "What?" "My invitation," I said. "Where is it?" Her eyes darted briefly toward the hallway, toward the bedroom, the dresser, the drawer, the one Ethan had told me about. I followed her gaze, then looked back at her. "I'd like to see it," I said. The words were calm, but they carried something else now. Not just hurt, not just confusion, resolve. Because I hadn't come all this way to leave with more questions. I had come for the truth, and it was only a few steps away, locked, hidden, waiting. Angela didn't move. Marcus watched her carefully. The silence stretched thick and heavy like the moment before a storm finally breaks. And in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't just about opening a drawer. This was about opening everything they had tried to keep closed. And once it was open, nothing would ever be the same again. Angela didn't move right away. Her eyes stayed fixed on me, wide and uncertain, like she was trying to measure just how far I was willing to go. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to, because for the first time since all of this began, I wasn't asking. I was waiting. Marcus shifted slightly beside her, his presence steady, controlled, as if he believed silence would work in his favor. It didn't. Not this time. "Angela," I said softly, "please." The word hung in the air, not as a command, not even as pressure, just a quiet request from a mother who had already lost more than she should have. She swallowed, then slowly she turned. Without a word, she walked down the hallway. I followed. I could feel Marcus behind us, his footsteps measured, deliberate, watching, always watching. Angela pushed open the bedroom door. The room looked exactly as it had the last time I was here, neatly arranged, everything in its place, like a life that had been carefully curated for someone else's approval. She walked straight to the dresser, stopped. Her hand hovered over the bottom drawer, the one Ethan had told me about. For a moment she didn't move, I could see her breathing change slower, heavier, like she was standing on the edge of something she couldn't step back from. Angela, Marcus said quietly from behind us, "We don't have to do this." She closed her eyes, just for a second, then opened them again. "Yes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We do." That was the first time she had said something that sounded like her, not him, not the version of her that had been shrinking behind excuses, but her. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small key. My chest tightened. A key. To keep something like that locked away. She inserted it into the drawer and turned it. The soft click echoed louder than it should have. Then she pulled the drawer open. Slowly. Carefully. Like she already knew what it would do to both of us. Inside, neatly placed beneath a stack of folded scarves, was a cream-colored envelope. My name written across it in elegant script. Diana Washington. I stared at it for a moment, not moving, not breathing, because seeing it there was different from imagining it. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a mistake. This was real. Angela stepped back, giving me space. I stepped forward. My hand trembled slightly as I reached down and picked up the envelope. It felt heavier than it should have, like it carried more than just paper inside. Like it carried every unanswered question, every ignored call, every quiet moment of distance that had led to this. I ran my fingers over my name, carefully, like I was touching something fragile, something that had already been broken. Then I opened it. Inside was the invitation. Beautiful, elegant. Everything you'd expect from a wedding like the one Angela had been planning. Her name, Marcus's name, the date, the location, all printed perfectly. Like nothing was wrong. Like everything was exactly as it should be. But it wasn't, because I was holding something I was never meant to see. I flipped it over, and that's when I noticed it. A small tear along the edge of the inner card. Not accidental, deliberate. Something had been removed. "Angela," I said quietly, holding up the torn edge, "what was here?" She didn't answer right away. Behind me I could feel Marcus shift, subtle, controlled, but I felt it. She started, then stopped. I turned to face her. "What was here?" My voice was still calm, but there was something underneath it now, something stronger, something that refused to be ignored. Angela's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't think you'd ever see it," she whispered. "That wasn't an answer. That's not what I asked." She looked at me, and for the first time, she looked like my daughter again. Not the woman trying to maintain control, not the person repeating someone else's words, just her. It was a note, she said softly. "What kind of note?" She hesitated, then glanced at Marcus. That was all it took. My chest tightened. "Angela," I said more firmly now, "look at me." She did, slowly, reluctantly. What did the note say? Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. And in that silence, I understood something before she even said it. It said, she began, her voice breaking, that we were keeping the ceremony small. I waited, that only immediate family would attend. I felt my grip on the invitation tighten. "And I'm not immediate family?" I asked. Tears slid down her cheeks now. "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" I pressed. She shook her head, her composure unraveling. "I didn't write it," she said quickly. "Marcus did." I turned slowly. Marcus met my gaze without flinching. "Is that true?" I asked. He didn't hesitate. Yes. No apology. No explanation, just a simple acknowledgement. Like it was nothing. Like it was normal. Why, I asked. He exhaled quietly as if the question itself was unnecessary. Because it made sense. The words landed harder than anything else he had said. "Made sense," I repeated. He nodded. "For the kind of event we're hosting, the people who will be there, the expectations." "There it is," again I said, cutting him off. Expectations. He didn't react, because to him this was reasonable, calculated, logical. And I didn't meet those expectations, I said. He didn't answer, because he didn't need to. I turned back to Angela. "And you agreed to this?" Her face crumpled. I didn't know what to do, she said, her voice shaking. Everything was moving so fast, and he kept saying it would be better this way, that it would avoid complications. So you hid it, I said. She nodded weakly. I thought, maybe you wouldn't find out. The honesty in that moment cut deeper than anything else, because it wasn't cruel. It was afraid. Afraid of conflict, afraid of choosing, afraid of losing something she thought she needed. I looked down at the invitation again, at my name, at the torn edge where a piece of truth had been removed, and I realized something. This wasn't just about being excluded. It was about being erased, quietly, carefully, like I didn't belong in the story anymore. I folded the invitation slowly, placing it back into the envelope. Then I looked at Angela. I spent my entire life making sure you never felt unwanted, I said softly. Her tears fell faster. And this, I held up the envelope slightly. This is how you make me feel now. I'm sorry, she whispered, but sorry felt small. Too small. I took a step back. I didn't come here to argue, I said. I came here for the truth. I looked between the two of them, and now I have it. The room felt different, heavier, real, because there was no more pretending, no more maybe, just the truth, clear, sharp, unavoidable. And now, I had to decide what to do with it. For a long moment, no one spoke. The room felt too small for the truth that had just been laid bare. Angela stood near the dresser, her shoulders trembling, her eyes fixed on the floor as if looking up might make everything worse. Marcus remained behind us, composed as ever, like nothing that had just happened had disrupted his world. And I stood in the middle of it, all holding an envelope that should have been handed to me with love, but had instead been hidden like a mistake. I took a slow breath, not to calm down, but to steady myself, because what came next mattered. Angela, I said quietly. She looked up, her face wet with tears. Yes, look at me. She did. And for a second I saw the little girl again, the one who used to search my face for reassurance, for guidance, for something solid to hold on to. But now, I wasn't sure what she was looking for. Do you understand what you've done? I asked. Her lips trembled. I know, I said gently. Not just hiding the invitation, not just agreeing with him. I gestured slightly toward Marcus without looking at him. I mean this. I held up the envelope again. This choice. Her breathing grew uneven. I didn't want to hurt you, she whispered. The words hung there, fragile, incomplete. I nodded slowly, and yet you did. Silence. Heavy, unavoidable. I thought. She started, then stopped. What I asked. I thought if I could just get through the wedding, things would go back to normal. I felt something inside me shift not into anger, but into something deeper. Disappointment. Normal, I repeated softly. Angela, nothing about this is normal. She wiped her face quickly as if trying to regain control. You don't understand the pressure I've been under, she said, her voice rising slightly. Everything has to be perfect. The venue, the guests, the image I echoed. There it was again. That word. The one that had quietly replaced everything real. I took a step closer. And where do I fit into that image, I asked. She hesitated. Just for a second, but that second was enough. You see, I said softly. Her eyes filled again. I didn't mean it like that. But that's exactly what it is, I replied. You didn't see me as part of your life anymore. You saw me as something that didn't match it. That's not true, she insisted. Then why am I holding an invitation that was never meant to reach me? She didn't answer. Because she couldn't. Because the truth was already standing between us, louder than anything she could say. Behind me, Marcus finally spoke. This isn't productive, he said calmly. I turned to face him. No, I asked. He shook his head slightly. Emotions are running high. Decisions like this require perspective, not reaction. Perspective. Another word, another layer of distance. Perspective, I repeated. Is that what you call this? He met my gaze steadily. I call it practicality. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so empty. Practicality would have been telling me the truth, I said. not writing my name on an invitation and then locking it away. He didn't flinch. Sometimes the truth creates unnecessary complications. There it was again, complications. Always something to avoid, always something to control. And sometimes, I said quietly, avoiding the truth creates something worse. He didn't respond, because he didn't believe that. Not really. To him, everything was a calculation, a trade-off, and I had been the piece he decided wasn't worth including. I turned back to Angela. "Did you ever plan to tell me?" I asked. Her silence was answer enough. I nodded slowly. "I see." My voice didn't shake, didn't rise, but something in it changed. Something final. "I spent years making sure you never felt like you didn't belong anywhere," I said. "And now?" I paused, letting the words settle. "Now I'm standing in your home, feeling like I have to justify why I should be part of your life. Mom, please," she started. "No," I said, gently raising a hand, not to silence her, but to stop the excuses before they could take shape. "I'm not asking you to choose between me and him," I continued. "That's not what this is about." Her brows furrowed slightly. "Then what is it about?" I looked at her. Really looked. "It's about whether you remember who you are." She blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" I took a breath. "The girl who stood up for herself when it mattered. The one who didn't let anyone decide her worth. The one who looked me in the eye and said she'd never let the world change her." Her expression shifted. Not into understanding. Not yet. But something moved. "I don't see her right now," I said softly. "I see someone who's afraid to upset a man who thinks he can decide who belongs in your life." "That's not fair," Marcus said sharply. I didn't even look at him, because this wasn't about him anymore. It was about her. "I'm not asking you to be perfect," I continued. "I'm not asking you to have everything figured out." My voice softened. "I'm asking you to be honest." Tears streamed down her face now. "I am being honest," she said, her voice breaking. "No," I replied gently. "You're being careful." The words hit her harder than anything else I had said, because they were true, and she knew it. I was scared, she admitted finally. There it was. Not polished, not rehearsed, just real. Scared of what I asked. Her eyes flickered toward Marcus for just a second before returning to me, of losing everything, she whispered. I nodded slowly. "And what is everything?" She didn't answer, but she didn't need to, because I understood. To her, everything had become this life, this image, this future Marcus had promised, and somewhere along the way, she had convinced herself that I didn't fit into it. I looked down at the envelope one last time, then back at her. "You're not losing everything," I said quietly. "You're deciding what everything is." The room fell silent again. Not tense this time, not explosive, just still, because the truth had shifted. It wasn't just about what had been done, it was about what came next. And for the first time since this began, that choice wasn't mine, it was hers. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was heavy, full of everything that had finally been said, and everything that could no longer be taken back. Angela stood there, her chest rising and falling unevenly, her eyes darting between me and Marcus, like she was caught between two worlds she didn't know how to hold at the same time. And maybe she was. Marcus was the first to break the silence. "This conversation has gone far enough," he said, his voice calm but firmer than before. "We're not going to resolve anything like this." I turned to look at him. "No," I said quietly. "We're finally seeing things as they are." His jaw tightened slightly, the first real crack I had seen in his composure. "You're making this emotional," he replied. "That's not helpful." I almost smiled. "Of course it's emotional," I said. "It's a wedding. It's family. What did you expect it to be, an investment portfolio?" Angela let out a small, shaky breath. "Please," she said softly. "Can we just stop for a second?" I looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time since I walked into that house, I saw just how tired she was. Not physically, but emotionally. Like she had been holding something in for so long that she didn't even know how to let it out anymore. "Okay," I said gently. Let's stop. Marcus stepped forward slightly, placing a hand on Angela's shoulder. The gesture looked supportive, but something about it felt controlling. We don't need to justify ourselves, Hila, he said quietly to her. We made a decision. It was the right one for us. Us. That word again, drawing a line, creating a boundary, excluding everything and everyone outside of it. Angela didn't respond right away. She just stood there, her body tense under his hand, and I saw it. The hesitation, the conflict, the part of her that wasn't fully convinced anymore. Angela, I said softly. Marcus's hand tightened slightly on her shoulder. Diana. He said, his tone sharper now. I think it's best if you give her some space. I met his gaze. No, I said simply. He blinked. Just once, not expecting that. This is between me and my daughter, I continued, and for a long time I've been giving space. Enough space for this to happen. I gestured lightly toward the envelope still in my hand. I'm not stepping back anymore. The room shifted, subtle but undeniable, because for the first time, I wasn't accommodating him. I wasn't adjusting. I wasn't trying to fit into a space he had designed. I was standing in my own. Angela looked at me, her eyes searching. Mom, she whispered. I stepped closer. Not confrontational, just present. You said you were scared of losing everything, I said gently. She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks again. Yes. I tilted my head slightly. Then let's be honest about what everything is. Marcus exhaled slowly. This is unnecessary, he said. I ignored him. Because this wasn't his moment. Is everything this wedding? I asked Angela. She hesitated. Or is everything the life you think comes with it? I continued. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. Or I said softly, is everything the people who have been there for you, long before any of this existed? Her breathing became uneven again. Mom, it's not that simple. It is, I said gently. It's just not easy. That landed. I could see it in her eyes, because deep down, she knew. Marcus stepped in, then his tone controlled but colder now. You're putting her in an impossible position. I turned to him. No, I said calmly. You did that when you made her choose between her life and her family. That's not what happened, he replied. Then explain it differently, I challenged. He held my gaze. We're building something, he said. A future, a certain standard of living. That requires alignment, another word, another layer. And I don't align, I said. He didn't answer. Because again, he didn't need to. I turned back to Angela. And you agreed with that, I asked softly. She shook her head quickly. No, I didn't think of it like that. But you acted on it, I said. Her shoulders sagged. I didn't know how to say no, she admitted. There it was, the truth beneath everything. Not just fear, but surrender. You used to, I said gently. She looked up at me confused. You used to know how to say no, I continued. You used to stand your ground. You used to believe that your voice mattered. Her eyes filled again. I still do, she whispered. Then use it, I said. The words hung in the air, simple but heavy. Marcus's hand was still on her shoulder, still grounding her, still guiding her. And I saw it clearly now. This wasn't just influence. It was pressure. Subtle, consistent, persistent. The kind that doesn't break you all at once, but reshapes you over time. Angela took a small step forward, just one, but it was enough for Marcus's hand to slip off her shoulder. A small shift, but it changed everything. I didn't want to lose you, she said to me, her voice trembling. I softened slightly. Then why did you push me away? She shook her head, tears falling freely now, because I thought I had to choose. The words echoed in the room, raw, honest, painfully clear. I nodded slowly, and now I asked. She looked at me, then at Marcus, then back at me, and in that moment I saw it. The decision forming, not fully made, not yet, but no longer hidden. I don't know, she whispered. It wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was real, and sometimes real is where everything begins. I took a step back, giving her space, not the kind that creates distance, but the kind that allows truth to breathe. You don't have to figure it out right now, I said gently. Marcus exhaled quietly like he had been holding something in. Good, he said. Then we can move forward. No, I said, cutting him off. Both of them looked at me. This doesn't move forward until it's understood, I continued. Not avoided, not managed, understood. I looked at Angela, and that part is up to you. The room fell silent again, but this time, it wasn't heavy. It was waiting, because something had shifted. Not completely, not yet, but enough to know. The next step wouldn't be controlled. It would be chosen. I didn't stay much longer after that. There was nothing left to say, not in that moment, not in that room. Some truths need time to settle. Some decisions need space to breathe. And I had already said everything I came there to say. I walked out of Angela's house slowly, the envelope still in my hand, though I didn't remember picking it up again. The sunlight outside felt brighter than it had when I arrived, almost harsh against my eyes. Or maybe it was just that everything inside me had changed. I got into my car, closed the door, and sat there without starting the engine. My hands rested on the steering wheel still, not shaking, not trembling, just still, because the storm I had expected never came. No shouting, no breaking point, just a quiet, steady realization. Angela had made her choice, not loudly, not dramatically, but clearly, and now I had to make mine. I looked down at the envelope in my lap. My name stared back at me. Diana Washington. Written beautifully, carefully, as if it had always been meant to reach me. But it hadn't, and that mattered more than anything else. I slid it back into my purse and finally started the car. The drive home felt different from the one earlier that morning. Not heavier, not lighter, just clearer, because the questions that had been circling in my mind for weeks were gone, replaced by answers I didn't want but needed. When I got home, the house greeted me the same way it always did. Quiet, familiar, honest, no polished surfaces, no careful presentation, just a space that held my life exactly as it was. I placed my purse on the table and sat down on the couch. For a long time, I didn't move, didn't think, just existed. Because sometimes, after everything falls into place, you need a moment where nothing does. A few hours later, there was a knock on the door. I didn't need to open it to know who it was. Grandma Ethan's voice called softly from outside. I stood up, walked to the door, and opened it. He looked up at me immediately, his eyes searching. "You okay?" he asked. I smiled faintly. "I will be." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Did you find it?" he asked. I nodded. I did. His face tightened slightly. Was it really there? Yes. He looked down for a moment, kicking lightly at the floor. "I told you," he said quietly. "I know you did," I replied, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. He looked up again. "Are you going to go to the wedding now?" The question lingered between us. Simple, innocent, but heavy with everything that had happened. I walked back to the couch and sat down, motioning for him to join me. He climbed up beside me, his small frame leaning slightly into mine. "I don't think so," I said softly. His brows furrowed. "Why not?" I took a breath. Because being invited isn't the same as being wanted. He thought about that for a moment. "But you're her mom," he said. "She has to want you there." I smiled gently. "Sometimes people forget what they should want," I said. He didn't fully understand. And I was glad, because some things shouldn't make sense at his age. "So you're just not going?" he asked again. I shook my head slowly. "No, I'm not going." The words felt strange, final but not wrong, not anymore. He leaned back slightly, processing. "That's gonna be weird," he said. "Yeah," I agreed softly. "It probably will be." He was quiet for a moment. Then almost in a whisper, he said, "I wish things were different." I wrapped an arm around him, pulling him closer. "Me too, baby," I said. "Me too." We sat there in silence for a while, the kind of silence that isn't empty but full of things you don't need to say out loud. Eventually, Ethan looked up at me again. "Are you mad at Mom?" he asked. I paused, not because I didn't know the answer, but because I needed to choose the right one. "I'm hurt," I said finally. He nodded slowly. "That makes sense." I let out a small breath. Kids have a way of seeing things clearly, without all the layers adults build around the truth. "I don't want you to be sad," he added. I smiled at him. "I won't always be," I said. "This is just part of it. Part of what letting go," I replied. The word hung there, not heavy, not sharp, just real. He leaned his head against my shoulder. "I don't want you to let go," he said softly. I tightened my arm around him. "I'm not letting go of you," I assured him. "Or her." He looked up quickly. "Then what are you letting go of?" I thought about it for a moment, then answered honestly. The idea that things are the way I wish they were. He didn't fully understand, but he nodded anyway. Because sometimes understanding isn't about knowing everything. It's about trusting what you feel. That evening, after Ethan left, I sat at the kitchen table again. The same place I had been the night before. But everything felt different now. Quieter, clearer. I reached into my purse and took out the envelope, set it on the table in front of me. For a moment, I just looked at it. Then I opened it again. Not because I needed to read it, but because I needed to see it one last time. The names, the date, the life that was moving forward. Without me. I ran my fingers over the paper, then slowly folded it back and placed it inside the envelope. Carefully, gently, like I was closing something that had already ended. Then I stood up, walked to the drawer by the kitchen counter and placed it inside. Not hidden, not locked, just put away, because I didn't need to carry it with me anymore. I turned off the lights and stood there for a moment in the quiet. Tomorrow, Angela would continue with her plans. The wedding would go on. Life would move forward, and I would be somewhere else. Not forgotten, not erased, but no longer standing in a place where I wasn't wanted. And for the first time since all of this began, that didn't feel like loss. It felt like truth. The morning of the wedding arrived quieter than I expected. No phone calls, no last-minute chaos, no rushed voices or laughter echoing through a house preparing for something big. Just stillness. I woke up before the sun fully rose the sky outside my window, painted in soft shades of gray and pale gold. For a moment I lay there, staring at the ceiling, letting the weight of the day settle in slowly. Today my daughter was getting married, and I wasn't part of it. Saying it in my mind felt strange, not sharp like it had days ago, not heavy like it should have been, just distant, like a truth I had already made peace with. I got out of bed and moved through my morning the way I always did. Coffee, a quiet breakfast, the hum of the house waking up around me, but underneath it all there was a pull, subtle, persistent, not strong enough to force me out the door, but present enough to be noticed. I ignored it at first, told myself I had made my decision, told myself there was nothing left to see, but as the hours passed, that feeling didn't fade. It grew, not into urgency, not into panic, but into something quieter, curiosity, closure, maybe even hope. By late morning, I found myself standing in front of my closet, staring at dresses I hadn't worn in years. I didn't reach for anything fancy, nothing that looked like I was trying to belong somewhere I had already chosen to step away from. Instead, I picked something simple, a soft blue dress, comfortable, familiar, something that felt like me. Not like an image, not like an expectation, just me. I dressed slowly, carefully, like I was preparing for something I hadn't fully admitted to myself yet. When I finished, I stood in front of the mirror. For a moment, I just looked, not at the lines on my face, not at the gray in my hair, but at the woman who had lived through everything it took to stand here today. And I realized something. I wasn't going there to be invited. I wasn't going there to be accepted. I was going because I needed to see it with my own eyes, the end of something, or maybe the beginning of something else. I grabbed my purse, my keys, and stepped outside. The drive to the venue felt surreal. Familiar roads leading to an unfamiliar destination. The closer I got, the more cars I saw. Dressed up people, excitement in the air, a celebration unfolding without me. Or so I thought. The hotel came into view exactly like the pictures I had seen online. Grand, elegant, the kind of place that didn't just host events, it showcased them. I parked across the street, not in the main lot, not among the guests, just close enough. I turned off the engine and sat there for a moment, my hands resting in my lap. This was it. The place where everything I had been pushed out of was about to happen. I could hear faint music drifting through the air, soft, distant, beautiful. I stepped out of the car and walked slowly toward the building, stopping just short of the entrance. From where I stood, I could see people moving in and out. Guests greeting each other, laughter, smiles, everything you'd expect from a wedding day. Everything that felt just out of reach. I stayed there. Not hidden. Not exactly, but not stepping forward either. Just observing. Like someone watching a story they were no longer part of. Minutes passed, maybe more. Time felt different standing there. Slower, heavier. I watched as a group of women in elegant dresses walked inside their heels, clicking softly against the pavement. I watched as a man adjusted his tie, laughing with someone beside him. I watched as life moved forward, without hesitation. And then, I heard it. Grandma, the voice cut through everything, clear, familiar. I turned just in time to see Ethan running toward me, his small frame moving quickly through the crowd. Ethan. I barely got his name out before he reached me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "You came," he said, pulling back to look at me, his face lighting up. I smiled softly. "I told you I might," I said. He shook his head. "No, you didn't. You said you weren't coming." I shrugged slightly. I changed my mind. He grinned. "I'm glad you did." For a moment, everything else faded. The music, the people, the tension, it was just him, just us. "Where's your mom?" I asked gently. His expression shifted slightly. "She's inside," he said. "She keeps looking at the door." My chest tightened. "She does." He nodded. "Yeah, she looks nervous." Nervous. That word didn't fit the image Angela had been trying to maintain. Perfect. Composed. In control. But nervous, that meant something else. "Did she know you were coming out here?" I asked. He shook his head. "No. I saw you from the window." I glanced toward the entrance. The doors stood open, guests still moving in and out, inside. Somewhere, my daughter was waiting. Not just for a ceremony, but for something else. I looked back at Ethan. "Do you think she wants me here?" I asked quietly. He didn't hesitate. "Yes." The certainty in his voice caught me off guard. "How do you know?" He smiled slightly. "Because she keeps checking." I let that settle, not as proof. Not as an answer, but as a possibility. Ethan took my hand. "Come on," he said. "You should come inside." I looked at the entrance again, at the line I had been standing outside of, the one I had convinced myself I didn't need to cross. And suddenly, it didn't feel like a wall anymore. It felt like a choice. I looked down at Ethan's hand in mine, then back at the doors, then at the life waiting on the other side, and for the first time that day, I took a step forward. Not because I had been invited, not because I had been asked, but because I had decided I wasn't going to stay outside anymore. The moment I stepped inside, everything felt louder. The music, the voices, the movement of people dressed in elegance and expectation. Crystal chandeliers reflected soft golden light across the ballroom, and rows of white chairs stretched toward a floral arch at the far end of the room. It was beautiful, perfect, exactly the kind of wedding Marcus would design. And yet, there was something missing. I could feel it before I even saw her. Angela stood near the front, surrounded by bridesmaids adjusting her veil, whispering final details, smoothing out every crease that didn't exist. She looked stunning. Her dress flowed around her like something out of a magazine, every detail carefully chosen, every angle curated. But her face didn't match the moment. Even from a distance, I could see it, the tension in her jaw, the way her eyes kept drifting toward the entrance, searching, waiting, for something that wasn't there, until now. Ethan squeezed my hand. "She's right there," he whispered. I nodded, my heart beating slower than I expected, not racing, not panicked, just steady, because something inside me had already settled. I wasn't here to interrupt. I wasn't here to demand anything. I was here to witness, to see the truth, all the way through. Ethan tugged gently. "Come on." We moved forward together, weaving through the crowd. A few people glanced at me, curious, polite, unfamiliar. I didn't recognize most of them, and they didn't recognize me. That, more than anything, told me everything I needed to know about the kind of world this wedding belonged to. Not mine. Not anymore. As we got closer, one of the bridesmaids noticed us first. Her smile faltered slightly, her eyes flickering with uncertainty. Then she leaned toward Angela and whispered something. Angela turned, slowly, and when her eyes met mine, everything stopped. The room didn't go silent. The music didn't fade. But between us, there was nothing else. Just distance, and everything that had built it. Her breath caught. I could see it. The way her shoulders lifted slightly, the way her lips parted, but no words came out. "Mom," she whispered. The word barely made it past her lips, but I heard it, and something inside me softened, just a little. I took another step forward, not rushing, not hesitating, just moving. "I didn't think you'd come," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't think I would either," I replied honestly. A tear slipped down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. Around us, the room continued to move, but slower now. More aware, more curious, because something was happening, something that didn't fit the script. Angela looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time in weeks. Maybe longer. "I kept looking for you," she admitted quietly. I tilted my head slightly. "Did you?" She nodded. I told myself I didn't care, but I kept checking the door. Ethan's words echoed in my mind. "She keeps looking." I glanced at him briefly, then back at her. Why, I asked softly. The question wasn't accusing, it wasn't sharp, just real. She swallowed hard. "Because it didn't feel right without you," she said. The honesty in her voice cut through everything else. Not polished, not rehearsed, just true. I stepped closer. Close enough now to see the small details, the way her hands trembled slightly, the way her eyes searched mine, like she was afraid of what she might find. Then why wasn't I supposed to be here, I asked. The question hung between us, not loud, but impossible to ignore. She looked down for a moment, then back up. Because I was trying to make everything else work, she admitted. Everything else, I repeated. She nodded. The expectations, the people, the life Marcus promised. Her voice wavered. I thought if I could just get through today, everything would fall into place. I studied her face, the uncertainty, the fear, the realization creeping in. "And has it?" I asked gently. She didn't answer right away, because she didn't need to. The answer was already there, in her eyes, in her silence, in the way her perfect day didn't feel complete. Behind her, I noticed movement. Marcus. He stood a few steps away, watching us, not interrupting, not stepping in, just observing. But this time something was different. He didn't look in control. He looked uncertain. Angela followed my gaze and turned slightly. Her expression shifted, not into fear, not this time, into something else, something stronger. When she turned back to me, there was a change, subtle but undeniable. "I made a mistake," she said. The words were quiet, but they carried everything. I didn't respond right away, because apologies are easy. Understanding them is not. "What kind of mistake?" I asked. She took a shaky breath. "The kind where I thought I had to become someone else to be accepted," she said. Her voice steadied slightly, and in doing that, I pushed away the person who never asked me to change. My chest tightened, not painfully but deeply. "Why didn't you say something?" I asked. She let out a small, broken laugh. "Because I was afraid you'd see it before I did." I nodded slowly. "That's what mothers do," I said softly. A tear slid down her cheek again. I know, she whispered. The music shifted slightly, signaling that the ceremony was about to begin. Guests started moving toward their seats. The moment was closing. Time was running out. Angela looked around briefly, then back at me. I can't do this, she said suddenly. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was clear. I felt something shift in the air. What do you mean? I asked. She shook her head. I can't stand up there and pretend everything is right when it's not. My heart skipped. Angela. No, she said more firmly now. I've been pretending for weeks, months. Her eyes flickered toward Marcus again, then back to me. I thought this was what I wanted, she said, but standing here, looking at you, her voice broke. I know it's not. The room was no longer just watching, it was listening, and what was about to happen was no longer just a wedding, it was a choice. And for the first time, Angela was ready to make it. The music didn't stop, but something else did. The quiet expectation that everything would go exactly as planned. Angela stood in front of me, her chest rising and falling as if she had just run a long distance, even though she hadn't moved at all. I can't do this, she repeated louder this time. A few heads turned, then more. The soft murmur of the room shifted into something sharper. Curiosity, confusion, anticipation. Marcus stepped forward immediately. Angela. He said, his voice low but firm. This is not the time. She didn't look at him. Not yet. I know exactly what time it is, she replied. Her voice shook slightly, but it didn't break. That alone told me everything. This wasn't fear anymore. This was decision. Then act like it. Marcus said, a hint of irritation slipping through his controlled tone. We have guests waiting. The ceremony is about to begin. Guests. Ceremony. All the pieces he cared about. Angela turned to him slowly. And for the first time since I had met him, she didn't look smaller in his presence. She looked certain. I'm not doing it, she said. The words landed like a crack in glass. Not loud, but final. Marcus's expression hardened slightly. Excuse me, I'm not walking down that aisle, she repeated. Now the room was fully aware. Voices dropped, eyes locked onto us. Because something was happening that wasn't supposed to happen. Something real. Marcus took another step closer. Angela. He said, his voice quieter now, more controlled. You're overwhelmed. That's normal. But this is not the moment to make emotional decisions. There it was again. Emotional. As if feelings were a weakness. As if clarity didn't come from them. Angela shook her head. No, she said. This is the first clear decision I've made in a long time. He stared at her, searching for the hesitation he was used to. The doubt. The space where he could step in and guide her back. But it wasn't there anymore. You're embarrassing yourself, he said, his tone sharpening. Angela flinched, just slightly, but she didn't step back. No, she replied quietly. I'm embarrassing the version of myself that let this go too far. The room held its breath. Even the air felt still. Marcus's composure slipped just enough for it to be noticeable. This is ridiculous, he said. After everything we've planned, everything I've done. Angela's eyes narrowed slightly. Everything you've controlled, she corrected. That hit him. I saw it, the flicker of something beneath his calm. You agreed to all of it, he said. I went along with it, she replied. That's not the same thing. Their words moved quickly, now tension building with every exchange. You knew what this was? Marcus continued. The kind of life we're building, the kind of people we're surrounded by. And where did my mother fit into that? Angela cut in. Silence. Not just between them, across the entire room. Because that question had no easy answer. Marcus didn't respond immediately, and that hesitation spoke louder than anything he could have said. Angela took a step forward. You wrote a note telling her she wasn't immediate family, she said. You told me it would make things simpler. He exhaled slowly, trying to regain control. It was about structure, about presentation. It was about exclusion, she said. Her voice didn't rise, but it didn't need to, because it carried truth. And I let it happen, she added, her tone softening just slightly. That's on me. I watched her carefully, Not just what she was saying, but how she was saying it. There was no panic now, no scrambling, just clarity. The kind that comes when you stop running from something. Marcus glanced around the room, aware now of the attention, the shifting energy. "This is not the place for this conversation," he said. Angela nodded. "You're right." For a moment it seemed like she might step back, like she might retreat, like she might choose the easier path one last time. But then she said, "Which is why I'm ending it here." The words landed like thunder, quiet but powerful. Marcus froze. "What did you just say?" Angela met his gaze fully now. "I'm not marrying you." Gasps rippled through the room, soft, sharp, unavoidable. For the first time, Marcus looked unprepared. "You don't mean that," he said quickly. "I do," she replied. "This is stress talking, no," she said again, more firmly. "This is me talking. The distinction mattered, and he knew it. You're throwing everything away," he said. Angela shook her head slowly. "No," she said. "I'm choosing what matters." Her eyes flickered to me, just for a second, but it was enough. Marcus followed her gaze, then looked back at her. "You're making a mistake," he said. Angela's lips pressed together slightly. Maybe she admitted. The honesty in that answer caught everyone off guard. "But it's my mistake to make," she added. Silence fell again, not tense, not chaotic, just real. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Then, without another word, he stepped back. Not dramatically, not angrily, just withdrew. Because for the first time, he wasn't the one in control. Angela turned away from him, slowly, deliberately, and faced me. Her eyes were still wet, her makeup slightly smudged, her perfect image undone. But she had never looked more like herself. "I'm sorry," she said. The words were simple, but they carried everything. I stepped closer, close enough to see the vulnerability in her expression, the fear, the relief, the uncertainty of what came next. I reached out and gently took her hands in mine. "They always say weddings are about beginnings," I said softly. She nodded, her lips trembling, but sometimes I continued. "The beginning isn't what you expected." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I don't know what happens now," she admitted. I smiled gently. "You don't have to," I said. She let out a small, shaky breath. "But I know one thing," she added. "What's that?" She squeezed my hand slightly. "I'm not losing you." Something inside me softened completely then. Not because everything was fixed, not because the past had disappeared, but because she had finally chosen truth. And sometimes, that's where everything begins again. The ballroom didn't return to normal after that. It couldn't. Moments like that don't just pass, they settle into the air, linger in people's expressions, reshape the space they happen in. Guests whispered quietly among themselves, some stunned, some sympathetic, others unsure where to look. A few began to slip out heels, clicking softly against the polished floor, their voices hushed but curious. But I didn't pay attention to them. Neither did Angela. Because for the first time that day, none of that mattered. She was still holding my hands, her grip firm like she was anchoring herself to something real after standing too long on something fragile. "I don't know how I let it get this far," she said, her voice trembling but steady enough to carry meaning. I studied her face. Not the makeup, not the dress, not the version of her that had been carefully constructed for this moment, but her. The girl I raised. The woman she was trying to become again. "You didn't let it happen all at once," I said softly. "It happens little by little. That's how people lose themselves." She nodded slowly, tears falling freely now. "I thought I was building something better," she admitted. "A better life, a better future." "And what did that look like?" I asked gently. She let out a small broken laugh. "Perfect," she said, "polished, impressive." Her eyes flickered briefly around the room, and empty, she added. The honesty in that word cut through everything else. I squeezed her hands lightly. "Nothing built on fear ever feels full," I said. She looked at me searching. I was afraid of disappointing him, she said. Afraid of not being enough in that world. And what about this one, I asked quietly. She frowned slightly. This one. The one where you're already enough, I said. Her expression shifted, not instantly but slowly, like something she had forgotten was starting to come back to her. I forgot that she whispered. I nodded. I know. For a moment we just stood there, the noise of the room fading into the background. Then she took a deep breath. What happens now? She asked. I smiled gently. Now I repeated. She nodded. I just walked away from my wedding. She said, a hint of disbelief in her voice. From everything I thought I was building. I tilted my head slightly. Or maybe I said you walked towards something you didn't realize you were losing. She considered that, really considered it, and I could see it, the shift happening inside her. Not complete, not finished, but real. I don't know how to fix this, she admitted. You don't fix it all at once, I said. You start with what's true. She looked down at our hands, then back up at me. What's true, she asked. I met her gaze. You're here, I said. You're honest, and you chose not to pretend. She let out a slow breath. That doesn't feel like enough. It's more than you think, I replied. Behind us, I heard small footsteps. Ethan. He slipped between us, wrapping his arms around both of us at once. You did it, he said, looking up at his mother. Angela let out a soft laugh through her tears. I guess I did, she said. He looked at me. I told you she wanted you here. I smiled, brushing a hand gently over his hair. You were right, I said. Angela crouched down slightly, pulling Ethan into a proper hug. I'm sorry, she whispered to him. He pulled back, confused. For what? For everything she said. He shrugged like it wasn't as complicated as she thought. It's okay, he said simply. Kids have a way of doing that, of forgiving before you even understand how much you needed it. Angela stood again, wiping her face lightly. What about Marcus? She asked, her voice quieter now. I followed her gaze. He was gone. Not dramatically, not in a scene. Just gone. Like someone who realized there was nothing left to control. Angela looked back at me. I thought I needed him, she said. Why, I asked gently. She hesitated. Because he made everything feel certain, she admitted. I nodded. Control can feel like certainty, I said, but they're not the same thing. She let that settle. I don't know what my life looks like without that, she said. I smiled softly. That's the part you get to discover, I said. She looked around the room, again the guests, the decorations, the remnants of a day that had been planned so carefully. I should probably say something, she said. I nodded. Then say it. She took a deep breath and turned toward the crowd. The room quieted again, attention shifting back to her. I know this isn't what anyone expected. She began, her voice steady despite everything. And I'm sorry for the confusion, for the disruption. She paused, glancing briefly at me. But I can't stand here and promise a life that doesn't feel true. She continued, not to him and not to myself. Murmurs spread softly through the room. I hope you understand, she added. And if you don't, I understand that too. There was no applause, no dramatic reaction, just quiet acceptance. Because sometimes truth doesn't need a performance. It just needs to be said. Angela stepped back, her shoulders relaxing slightly, like she had just set something down that she had been carrying for too long. She turned to me again. Can we go home? She asked. The word caught me. Home. Not her house, not the life she had been building, but home. I nodded. Of course, I said. We walked out together, not as strangers, not as people trying to find their way back, but as something simpler, something real. Mother, daughter, and a little boy who had quietly held the truth when no one else would. Outside, the air felt different, lighter, like something had shifted not just inside us, but around us. Angela slipped her hand into mine as we walked to the car, a small gesture, but it meant everything. I'm scared, she admitted softly. I squeezed her hand. I know I said, but I'm here. She nodded, and for the first time in a long time, that was enough. Sometimes the hardest truths are the ones we try the most to avoid. We tell ourselves it's easier to stay quiet to go along to protect something fragile rather than risk breaking it. But the truth is, anything built on silence, fear, or compromise of your values will eventually crack. Family isn't about perfection. It isn't about image status or fitting into someone else's idea of what life should look like. It's about presence, honesty, the people who stand with you when everything else falls away. Diana didn't fight to be included in a wedding. She stood up for something deeper, her place in her daughter's life. Angela didn't just walk away from a man. She walked back toward herself. And sometimes, that's the bravest decision a person can make. If you've ever felt pushed aside, forgotten, or made to feel like you don't belong, remember this. Your value is not decided by someone else's expectations. Your place is not something you have to earn. And the people who truly love you will never ask you to disappear to make things easier. So tell me, what would you have done in Diana's place? Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and standing up for yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story touched you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that remind us what truly matters.